A pale shard of sunlight struck the fractured highway, illuminating a band of dust so thick it might have been the physical residue of despair. The old road stretched across desolate land, twisting through the periphery of a once thriving city. Now, only the skeletons of buildings and the broken shells of vehicles remained, as silent testimony to the wars that had ravaged the planet. And through the haze, a swirling, microscopic soup of toxins and hallucinogenic particulates, every shattered structure flickered like a mirage. What looked like a row of intact windows might be illusions of glass, and the far-off silhouettes of flying machines could be nothing but swirling gray motes dancing in the atmosphere. Only those who had learned to anchor themselves with unwavering caution could navigate this realm without succumbing to madness. In the early days, scientists had warned that continuing the wars would place too great a strain on the planet's environment. Each new explosive, each chemical-laden missile, and experimentation had introduced more contaminants into the atmosphere. Eventually, the toxins coalesced into a perpetual haze that enshrouded Earth like a malignant blanket. To breathe unfiltered air was to inhale the nightmares of the planet itself. Your mind might conjure illusions so convincing that you'd walk off a cliff, believing it was simply a straight road. Some survivors told stories of entire towns who marched into the sea, craving imaginary waters of salvation. Layla was one such survivor, steering a beaten-up truck across the collapsed highway with fierce concentration, glancing frequently at a gauge affixed to the console, the only real measure of the truck's internal air filtration system. She wore a scavenged mask that filtered out most of the particulates, but it was not foolproof. At any moment, a tear in the tattered cloth could let in a wisp of the haze, birthing illusions that played on her deepest fears and desires. Years of exposure had taught her to question every sight. If she glimpsed something too beautiful, too perfect, she would also glance down at her filtration gauge to confirm her reality. This was how she stayed alive. She had not seen another human in weeks, though she believed there must be communities somewhere, banding together in sealed domes or deep underground. Basically, everyone traveled alone, or in small packs that guarded their resources jealously. Groups often fell victim to infighting, especially if a stray leak in their protective gear led to wild hallucinations of betrayal or monstrous transformations. One day they were a cohesive unit, the next mistrust and illusions tore them apart. The haze did not merely poison the lungs, it corroded the human spirit, dividing survivors into islands of solitude. Layla's destination was the rumored Compound Sentry, a place that was said to have working air exchangers and minimal infiltration by the haze. Some travelers whispered that it was a myth, just another illusion conjured by a desperate mind. But Layla clung to that hope, a place where the swirling toxins could be kept at bay, where dreams were still fantasies of the mind, not forced upon you by the environment. If it existed, it offered her best chance for long-term survival. Even so, she couldn't help but wonder if the Compound Sentry was like one of those shining illusions she sometimes spotted in the distance. As twilight approached, the haze thickened, making each shadow flicker with exaggerated menace. She pulled the truck to the side of the road, near the burnt-out hull of an ancient bus. The engine coughed, sputtered, and died. The fuel she'd scavenged earlier that week was nearly gone. Silently cursing her luck, she realized she would have to continue on foot. But first, she needed shelter. The bus might suffice for the night. The structure was precarious, leaning on shattered wheels, but it was better than sleeping outside in the swirling madness. A quick pass with her flashlight revealed rows of disintegrating seats. Some overhead luggage racks remained, their contents spilled across the aisles. She ventured toward the rear, stepping gingerly over scattered debris, and found a back seat that looked mostly intact. Its cushion was mottled with blackish mold, but it was better than lying on the rusted floor. She rigged some scraps of plastic sheeting over the broken windows to block the haze, then adjusted her mask and settled in for the night. Even with those precautions, the haze sometimes seeped through invisible gaps and pinned wicked dreams to her mind. Layla awoke with a shudder, sweat coating her body beneath her protective clothes. She had dreamt of her old home, a tidy, sunlit house in a suburban neighborhood, but even in the dream the sunlight had a sickly pallor, and the comforting arms of her parents felt slightly off. like a puppet show reenactment of what it meant to be a family. When she stirred, she heard static from the handheld radio she always carried. Normally, the device picked up nothing but static, but occasionally, faint voices squeaked through the frequency. She grabbed it now, heart pounding. Was it a genuine broadcast or a trick of the haze? Testing? If anyone can hear latitudes crossing, urgent, safe zone. The words were so faint she could barely make them out. Static devoured the rest. She pressed the earpiece closer and tried to optimize the frequency, but the voice disappeared altogether. Her mind reeled with possibilities. Maybe the compound sentry did exist, and someone there was trying to reach out. Without fuel, though, she'd have to walk. She decided to move at first light. Morning brought no clarity to the land. The haze diffused the weak sun, casting everything in a perpetual twilight. Layla prepared herself to travel westward, hoping to locate roads or signs pointing her toward where she suspected the compound sentry might lie. She tightened the straps of her mask, rolled up a thick scarf around her mouth and nose for an extra barrier, and set out with a small rucksack of supplies, a couple of water canisters and a handful of nutrient bars she'd salvaged from an abandoned store. She walked through desolate suburbs and farmland. Here and there, twisted skeletons of fields that once grew corn or wheat stood like black shadows against the horizon. Sometimes, illusions teased her vision. A glimpse of a farmhouse with bright windows and smoke rising from a cozy fireplace. She had learned not to run toward such apparitions blindly. Instead, she waited a few minutes, like mirages in the desert. The heartbreak they brought with them made her wince, but chasing illusions was a sure path to a painful end. Midday brought a shifting of the toxins in the air. The thick, swirling, suspended dust seemed to glow with a faint lavender hue. That was always a warning sign. More potent hallucinations could bloom at any moment. She found shelter under an overturned tractor-trailer alongside the collapsed highway. The container was empty except for a few crumpled boxes scattered around. She leaned against the metal side, listening with her radio for that faint voice again. Static droned endlessly. The faint, flickering hope that she might hear something, anything, gnawed at her. She pressed her ear tighter, but there was nothing. With a sigh, she sat in silence, forcing herself to stay alert and calm. Over and over, she repeated a mantra in her head that she had learned from an old soldier long ago. Remember who you are. Remember what's real. Crawling out when the sun slipped lower, she resumed her journey. The crumbled road stretched onward, flanked by rusted cars and skeletons of lampposts. She passed the remains of a billboard knocked down into a ditch. Its peeling paint suggested something about a new dawn. Likely a recruitment poster from the war's final days. She tried not to think about the war's tragedies, or the countless lives lost. Those thoughts could draw illusions that fed on regret. A half-mile further, she sensed motion in her peripheral vision. She turned quickly, scanning the direction. Her pulse thumped. Was it another survivor, or was it just the haze playing tricks? But there, being the sagging shape of two collapsed houses, she spotted a human silhouette. Alert, she took careful steps forward, one hand hovering near the small pistol holstered at her waist. The figure stood very still, almost as if waiting for her. Caution warred with curiosity. Human contact carried dangers, illusions of shapeshifters, or simply desperate survivors who might kill for supplies. But maybe she wasn't alone. Maybe this was real. She took a step closer, calling out through her mask. "Hello?" The figure moved, revealing a rifle at its side. Immediately, Layla's heart lurched. She paused and tried again, raising a hand in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to hurt you. I need help." To her relief, a voice came from behind a mask similar to hers, and it sounded human, not some twisted echo. "I've been watching you for an hour. You traveled alone, right?" It was a man's voice, muffled but clear enough. Now that she was closer, she saw that his gear was more advanced than hers. His filters looked newer, and the rifle was well maintained. At that moment, she realized how meager her own supplies were. "Yes," she replied, forcing her voice to stay steady. I didn't even know you were there. He kept his distance but lowered his rifle a bit. Do you have a name? Layla. He nodded. I'm Silas. I also heard that radio broadcast a couple weeks back. I'm heading in what I think is that direction. Taking a quick glance around, he continued, we can travel together if you want, though we'll have to be careful about illusions messing with our heads. Relief mixed with wariness. Trusting someone in this world could be dangerous, but so was walking alone. Silas seemed real enough. The tension in his posture looked genuine. No illusion she'd experienced before had that subtle shifting of a person trying to appear non-threatening. Even illusions that looked human rarely carried such nuance. After a moment, she nodded. Let's go. They skirted around the ruined houses, Silas leading with quiet caution. He tested each path with a practiced eye, scanning for any shimmering edges or odd folds in the horizon that might indicate illusions. Her heart drummed as she followed him, feeling a mixture of hope for companionship and fear that she might be walking into a trap. So far, though, he seemed reliable enough. He offered her some purified water from his canteen, and she returned the kindness by passing him one of her nutrient bars. Eventually, the pair settled for the night inside a half-collapsed warehouse. The roof had caved in, but the walls offered some barrier from the swirling haze. Together, they used plastic sheeting and tape to seal off any openings. Without speaking much, they divided the watch, ensuring that if one started hallucinating too violently, the other could intervene and prevent any disastrous outcome. During the second watch, as Layla dozed, she heard Silas pacing around. A few minutes later, he nudged her awake. I swear I heard voices, he whispered. Sounded like a crowd of them. She jerked upright, gaze swinging to the broken walls. Through the plastic barrier, the soft moan of wind teased her ears, but she heard no distinct voices. Still, she trusted his hearing, so they crouched, straining to listen. Then, faint as an exhalation, the echoes drifted by, laughter, shouting, the clamor of a bustling marketplace. Silas met Layla's eyes with alarm. The haze must be messing with me. Let's confirm, she suggested. She pulled out her radio, fiddling with the knob. Only static responded. She tried a few times to check the stillness outside. The illusions certainly had more potency at night, feeding on vestigial human fears. For the next hour they huddled there, hearing phantom calls that rose and fell in a swirl of uncanny acoustics. Eventually, the false voices faded. They breathed a collective sigh of relief. Dawn broke soon after, and they packed up to keep moving, although the memory of those spectral crowds haunted them both. As they trudged across dust-draped plains, they traded stories and low voices to keep each other real. Layla recounted how she had fled her home when she was just 16, after her father disappeared in a fit of hallucinations. She recalled hearing him ranting about how the enemy's infiltration unit had replaced her mother. One night, he vanished into the swirling haze, never to return. Silas told her he had tried to join a militia that guarded a series of bunkers near the Atlantic coast. But their stronghold had fallen under illusions so powerful they turned on each other. He managed to slip away before the bloodshed ended them all. Late in the afternoon, they approached a broken sign hammered into a leaning post. The words were nearly gone, but from the shape of the letters, Silas guessed it might say Sentry. Fear and excitement mingled in Layla's chest. Could this be the route to the rumored refuge? On the horizon, they noticed an odd structure standing above the wreckage of a collapsed building. It appeared to be a tower slender, with a blinking red light near the top. Something about the blinking drew their eyes, mesmerizing in a world largely devoid of electricity, but illusions could replicate such phenomena, so they moved cautiously. Each step seemed to bring them closer to some sort of enclosed compound. Fences, or what remained of them, lined the perimeter. Beyond the twisted wires was a large facility, half destroyed but partially intact. A heavy metal gate lay off its hinges in the dust. Entering the compound, they surveyed the rubble. They found footprints and cart tracks and the dusty ground signs of life. Silas's grip tightened on his rifle. Without a word, they pressed on. Eventually, they reached a courtyard overshadowed by the tower. Rows of solar panels, or remnants thereof, lay scattered around. The place seemed deserted. But illusions or no illusions, The air here felt marginally fresher, as if some kind of filtration system was at work. Leela breathed in tentatively, noticing her headache ever present, and the open haze seemed to lessen. The courtyard opened into a broad hall. The door was jammed, so Silas had to shoulder it with force. Inside, they discovered what looked like a reception area. Chairs were toppled, but the lights overhead flickered weakly. A generator thrummed somewhere, a real sign of functioning technology. On a nearby desk, they found a half-eaten meal, still fresh. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps reverberated from deeper in the facility. They turned, weapons raised. A pair of figures emerged from a corridor, a woman and a man, both clad in advanced filtration suits. Their body language betrayed surprise and caution in equal measure. The woman lifted her hands, voice hard-edged but not overtly hostile. "Who are you? How did you find this place?" Silas carefully lowered his rifle. "We saw the tower," he said, glancing at Layla. "We've been following rumors of a safe compound." The two strangers exchanged a look. The man stepped forward. "I'm Adam. This is Myra. We've been trying to stabilize the filtration system, keep illusions out. This was once a military outpost, and it still has partial functionality, but it's far from perfect." He nodded toward the half-eaten meal on the desk. "We're short on everything: supplies, labor, stable minds. If you're here, we could use help, but if you've got any illusions messing with your heads, you'll need regular checks." Layla felt an odd swell of relief. "We'll do whatever it takes," she said. "We just need a place to stay, to not wander in that haze anymore." Myra shrugged, gesturing for them to follow. "We test new arrivals. We have partial stores of medication that counteracts long-term effects of the toxins, but it's limited. If you're stable, you can remain. Just no violence. We've had too many tragedies already." The facility corridors led to a makeshift infirmary. There, a tall man in a white apron organized vials on a metal tray. He introduced himself as Dr. Reyes, a physician who had survived the wars and ended up at this outpost after a grueling journey. His eyes held a weariness that spoke of having seen too many illusions wreak havoc on people's minds. He tested both Layla and Silas for elevated toxin levels, shining a small flashlight in their eyes and checking their reflexes. The journey through the haze had left them both with moderate levels of contamination, but apparently not life-threatening. Dr. Reyes injected them with a mild antitoxin solution, explaining quietly. "It won't magically rid your body of every hallucinogen, but it helps slow the absorption into your brain. We had more advanced therapies once, but we used them up or they were destroyed long ago." Silas rolled down his sleeve and glanced at Leela. The tension in his expression softened. For the first time, she saw a hint of genuine hope in his eyes. She remembered how alone she'd felt all those weeks on the road, half convinced her life would end in the swirl of illusions. Yet now, they stood in a place that resembled a community, albeit a fragile one. Adam led them through the rest of the outpost. "We tried to seal most external cracks, but the haze seeps in. Our biggest advantage is that we still have some operational fans and filters in the main building. It's enough to keep the toxin level relatively low, but it's nowhere near a clean environment. We each have tasks: some maintain the generator, others farm in the greenhouse, or secure the perimeter. You'll be expected to do your part if you stay." Layla agreed without hesitation. "I'll do anything. I can scavenge for supplies, help with repairs. I've picked up some mechanical skills." Silas nodded. "I can handle perimeter security." Myra turned to them, eyes grim behind her visor. "We do have illusions inside these walls occasionally. People see ghosts of their loved ones, sometimes shapes prowling the halls. We have protocols to prevent panic, buddy systems, daily check-ins, journaling what we see. So if something seems off, we talk about it. We don't just run or shoot." She looked pointedly at Silas's rifle. "We don't want anyone's illusions leading to real harm." They settled into a routine over the next few days. Layla helped Dr. Reyes in the infirmary, cleaning instruments and organizing meager medical supplies. It wasn't glamorous, but she found solace in the structured tasks and the faint hum of the air filtration vents overhead. Meanwhile, Silas joined the security teams at the perimeter fence, keeping watch for roving bandits or illusory threats. Sometimes, illusions could take the shape of entire armies approaching, and the watchers needed to be highly skilled in identifying them. The haze outside might conjure swirling shapes of soldiers or monstrous beasts, only to dissolve if challenged. At night, the outpost's corridors echoed with uneasy quiet. The storm of illusions softened here, but it never vanished. She heard stories from other residents. Someone claimed they saw their grandmother beckoning them from the courtyard fountain, but recognized the shimmering around her outline for what it was. Others woke up convinced a giant serpent was coiled in the rafters, only to discover a twisted bit of piping that had triggered the hallucination. Vigilance became a form of community endurance. Slowly, Leela and Silas both earned trust. They showed up for shifts. They participated in group council sessions, where illusions were discussed without judgment. The group's cardinal rule was, if you see something, say something, so that illusions had less power to isolate and confuse individuals. One evening, Layla found herself in the facility's small greenhouse, rummaging through seeds with Adam. The greenhouse had partially functioning lights and a closed-circuit system to filter the haze out, allowing for the growth of stunted but edible plants. Adam shared how he'd once led an entire platoon in the war, then deserted when he realized the environment was being irreversibly damaged. Now, the war was over. The world left a swirling, toxic ruin. We try to keep hope alive, he said, gently tending to some seedlings, but illusions tear at the edges of our sanity daily. A few mornings later, a distant explosion rattled the outpost. Sirens wailed, causing everyone to scramble to their stations. Silas and the perimeter guards reported that a group of raiders had apparently launched a crude mortar from behind a hill. Through the haze, it was impossible to confirm how many there were or if the threat was real. Images flickered in the swirling air. The outpost defenders aimed rifles at shifting shapes. Myra barked orders. "Hold your fire until we confirm a target." The illusions can trick a watchman into firing on nothing, wasting precious ammo or risking friendly fire. Layla rushed to help Dr. Reyes set up trauma stations in the corridors in case of an actual assault. She felt her hands shaking, haunted by the possibility that raiders might be illusions, or illusions might mask genuine attackers. The warnings from the war's earliest days replayed in her head. If you fight each other within the haze, you might be fighting nightmares conjured by your mind. She forced her breathing to slow, repeating her mantra with each inhalation. Outside, Silas and Adam peered through the perimeter scopes. The swirling haze made it nearly impossible to confirm anything. Occasionally, a muzzle flash lit the distance, but it might have been a reflection of the dying sun or an actual weapon discharge. The outpost sirens continued their shrill cry. Finally, Silas returned to the main gate, shoulders slumping. "False alarm, I think. We can't see anything out there. The illusions were triggered by a localized swirl of chemicals, or so it seems." Myra's voice carried disbelief. "We heard explosions." Adam nodded, glancing at her. "We did, but illusions can produce sounds too. It's the uncertain nature of this haze. We can't confirm any real threat. Best to remain on alert until the air patterns shift." They waited another tense hour before standing down. The illusions receded, leaving a thick quiet over the compound. Some members of the outpost shook with adrenaline, while others muttered curses about how the haze had nearly driven them to fire on ghosts. It was a stark reminder that their safety rested on razor-thin margins. In the following days, life resumed its tenuous rhythm. Each dawn they tested the air filtration system, scrounged for salvageable parts, and shared meager meals. Over shared chores, people formed connections that might have been impossible outside. Layla often found herself beside Silas in the evenings, sitting near the generator's soft hum, talking of the future in hushed voices. The illusions had not magically dissipated, but with each other's companionship and the outpost's disciplined vigilance, they found a semblance of normalcy. There were no illusions that could replicate the sense of genuine human trust. Weeks passed. The greenhouse sprouted more vegetables, small but nourishing. The perimeter held, with no sign of real raiders. And with each new day, the survivors found ways to patch cracks in the walls, gather fresh water, and share knowledge. Dr. Reyes taught them about the new wave of toxins. Myra instructed them in evaluating illusions. Adam oversaw expansions of the fence line, hoping one day they might have enough space to rebuild a town. Only time would tell if such efforts would succeed. One evening, after the daily chores ended, a hush fell over the courtyard. The blinking tower light beeped a momentary signal, some automatic relay that still functioned from old war code. Silas and Leela were sitting on a low concrete barrier, resting. She stared at the swirling haze overhead, thinking of the illusions she had endured on her travels. It felt surreal now, to find a place that was not entirely free from illusions, but at least had rules and structure to keep them in check. She turned to Silas, her voice carrying a tentative optimism. Do you think the world can ever recover? Maybe if someone somewhere has the technology to clear the atmosphere? He took a long moment before answering. I'm not sure. But at least here, we have a chance to survive. And maybe that's all we can hope for, small bastions of sanity in a bigger realm of nightmares. Layla nodded, reflecting on how far she'd come. The horrors of the road were still fresh in her mind. Illusions of loved ones. Illusions of enemies that had turned out to be empty air. Here, she found people who were truly trying to make sense of a world turned upside down. Even if illusions thickened every day, they were forging a fragile community. Night deepened. Some of the outpost residents gathered for a modest meal in a common area. Candlelight glimmered over anxious faces. A few children, who had grown up in this haze, toyed quietly with makeshift dolls. Dr. Reyes read from a battered paper book, the words describing an old tale of peace before the wars. His voice was somber, his face etched with the knowledge that the world had slipped into a living nightmare. Yet in that moment, heads bowed close, illusions flickering just out of sight, they found something precious. Unity. If the haze outside twisted shapes, if it conjured illusions to break spirits, then in here, they would stand guard over one another's minds. They would speak out when shadows looked too real, and comfort those who woke screaming from nightmare. Because in a world defined by uncertainty, where every horizon might be a mere mirage, human connection remained the only solid ground. Here, in the battered halls of a military outpost turned sanctuary, they would endure. Perhaps one day they might even thrive, steadily pushing back the boundaries of the haze, guiding new survivors home. Until then, they stayed vigilant, hearts bolstered by the shared knowledge that together they could navigate the illusions that threatened their sanity. And as Layla finally closed her eyes to rest, she held on to the hope that this sense of belonging could outlast the swirling hallucinations. Through all the heartbreak and broken roads, she and the others found a simple truth to cling to. They were not alone anymore. And that was more real than any haze-born nightmare.